يا الله يا رب العالمين.
Welcome to the Ummah Talk podcast with me, Fatima Barkatulla.
Let the Ummah rise again.
In this podcast, I speak to scholars, experts, leaders in their field about some of the big issues facing the Muslim community worldwide, as well as your local Muslim community here, especially in the West. So please tune in. You can catch the podcast on Muslim Central Podcasts, which is available on all sorts of audio platforms. The podcast episodes will also be available on YouTube. So do share the episodes. Let me know what you think about the ideas and the topics that we discuss in the episodes. The revival of the message of Islam, the revival of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a responsibility, and it's the responsibility of every single generation to strengthen and pass on something better to the next generation. And I hope that we can begin to do that. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Ummah Talk podcast. We've just come out of Hajj season, and one of the striking things about Hajj that is commonly pointed out is the equality and the diversity of people of all different racial backgrounds coming together side by side, wearing those two white sheets. And, Hajj has become a symbol really of the brotherhood of humanity, and has become very symbolic of that. And that's one of the most striking things that you get when you look at images from Hajj, right? We know that Malcolm X, famously in his letter from Hajj, said that it basically changed the way he thought about race and the relations between the races. He said, America needs to understand Islam because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem. Throughout my travels in the Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and even eaten with people who in America would have been considered white. But the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I have never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together, irrespective of their color. And that's a famous quote that most of us have probably read or heard. However, we know that although the Prophet ﷺ and the Quran is unequivocal when it comes to discrimination based on skin color, what about Muslim societies and Muslim history? Are Muslim societies free of racism? Has Islamic history been free of racism? And what about modern ideological responses to racism, such as critical race theory? How should we as Muslims be viewing them? I've got here with me today a special guest to help me answer some of these questions, because actually I don't know the answers to all of these questions myself. And alhamdulillah, I have with me Shaykh Dr. Abdullah bin Hamid Ali all the way from California. Shaykh Abdullah teaches courses in Islamic law and prophetic tradition at Zaytuna College in California. He specializes in Islamic law with particular emphasis on commercial law, family law, and inheritance law. He's translated written works of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali and Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, as well as authored numerous books and articles. He studied Sharia at the Al-Qayrawiyyin University, I think I've pronounced that correctly, and went on to complete an MA and PhD at Graduate Theological Union in California. And his PhD thesis was entitled "The Negro in Afro-Arabian Muslim Consciousness." So, with that great introduction, I hope, I'd like to welcome Dr. Abdullah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, isn't it amazing that we can speak like this? Like I'm sitting here in London and you are, I
Yeah.
believe, in California.
Yes, in California.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. Miraculous to an extent.
Yes, subhanallah. Jazakallah khairan for joining me. You know, Sheikh Abdullah, just before we like get into the discussion, just so that people know like a little bit about your background, would you be please willing to just share with us a little bit about your own background, like growing
Yes.
up and things like that?
Yeah,
What's your
sure.
background?
Sure, I can do that. My parents accepted Islam around in the early '60s, and they were followers of Elijah Muhammad, and they converted to the Nation of Islam. And upon the death of Elijah Muhammad, they followed his son Imam Wartadin Muhammad, and I grew up. Spent about maybe the first 11 years of my life in Chicago after being born in Philadelphia, and then would relocate once again to Philadelphia around the year 1984. My family background's largely, I guess you would say, cultural Muslim in that sense, in that in spite of my parents' conversion, we were not necessarily taught the basics of real Islam. And my father was the only person in our house that was praying at the time. After he followed Imam W.D. Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, they started to institute the 5 daily prayers. Eventually my parents would get divorced in Philadelphia, and around that same time, I would discover a Sunni Muslim family in the area. And I would start to go to their home, visit their home, and start to learn the basics of Islam. That's where I had my first look at an all Arabic Quran, and I was fascinated with the language. And then I tried to teach myself Arabic, and then eventually, about 2 weeks later, I discovered an Eritrean teacher who was a local traveling Arabic teacher who studied in Egypt, and I started to study with him. So I did that for about a year, and then eventually I would study with an institution close to the other institution called the Kuba Institute, where a few American scholars who had studied in Saudi Arabia had started a new Arabic language program as well. I studied with them for a number of years, and also Quran with them. And some basic introduction to some of the Islamic sciences. And, long story short, eventually I would go to study at Temple University for 2 years. And then I went to Morocco to study at the Colorism University. And I returned in 2001. I was teaching at a Muslim school, the same school that I attended prior to leaving the U.S. And then I became a chaplain at a state correctional institution in Pennsylvania, on the East Coast of the United States. And I did that for 5 years. And in my 5th year, I was invited by Zaytuna to come to take up the post of resident scholar. And then eventually I would complete my master's and my PhD, and my master's in ethics and social theory, and then my PhD in cultural and historical studies and religion.
Wow, mashallah. I had no idea about your background, and even the connection with, your parents' connection with the Nation of Islam, etc. Do you actually remember, like, being?
Yeah, I remember attending summer camp program when I was younger, but I wasn't indoctrinated. My older siblings were indoctrinated into the original teachings of the Nation of Islam. My oldest brother, my sister, and my second oldest brother. But the rest of us, we really didn't get that indoctrination. We were more just sort of left as like free spirits to sort of like figure out our own way. But I do remember attending we call it the temple, right? On a basis, especially on Fridays. So, yeah.
Okay, wow. And so does that, like, just out of interest, like, now is there still like tension between people who left and people who are there, or is it pretty much that most people have left?
You mean people who left the Nation of Islam?
Yeah, within your own circle.
I wouldn't necessarily say that there's tension, but I do think that those who followed Imam W.D. Muhammad into Sunni Islam, they definitely have aired their own negative view of those who followed Farrakhan, and vice versa. That there is, that each group considers the other group misguided. But I wouldn't say it's tension to the extent that people are fighting and their physical violence and those type of things. But I think this people just sort of keep their distance from one another and avoid certain conversations, but acknowledge the value of the movement itself, and that it was relevant, and most probably would say probably necessary for the times in American history because of the civil rights struggles at the time.
SubhanAllah, yeah. I mean, as a student in Egypt, I actually met former Nation of Islam members who had left, and now they were there studying with their children. And it was a new thing for me, maybe just because I've grown up in London and not really had any connection with Americans before that. Right. And my only connection had been reading the Autobiography of Malcolm X as a teenager. And believe it or not, even as somebody who came from an Indian background, as in my parents came from India to Britain, being visibly Muslim and growing up in the UK, obviously you do face, and we did face, a lot of racism. And the Autobiography of Malcolm X was completely life-changing, even for somebody like me, right. Because it was the first time I realized there were Western Muslims like him, and also because he articulated a kind of pride and in the Muslim identity that I'd never experienced before that. So yeah, so it was it was a life-changing book for me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. No, I was just going to say that that book, the Autobiography of Malcolm X, has influenced so many people's lives. I know a number of white Americans who actually were led to Islam because of the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Yeah, which is really interesting. When we consider what's happening today, with among certain Muslims, actually, see some ridiculous, outrageous posts saying that that white people shouldn't become Muslim, etc. So yes, it's really interesting.
That brings me to the topic of, I guess, critical race theory, because when I was first exposed to critical race theory, some aspects of it rang true. Especially, like I said, growing up in Britain in the 80s, especially, a lot of racism, and to some extent, I feel like I experienced structural racism as well. But to be honest, Dr. Abdullah, this might sound strange, and maybe I'm living in an ivory town myself, but my experience was I always felt a huge sense of privilege myself, even though I grew up in a really rough part of London, East London, in what probably would be called in America the projects, right? I didn't really see it like that. I think because I was a Muslim and I grew up in a religious family, I always felt really privileged because I seemed to know what the purpose of life was. I knew, I had a framework and a structure for life in a way that so many people around me, regardless of their race, white or black, or any other ethnicity, didn't seem to have, So for me, I always felt a certain strange sense of privilege, being clear on so many things, having a father who was a scholar who gave us a lot of clarity, So sometimes I read about white privilege and also some aspects of critical race theory that seem to imply a certain type of ingrained disadvantage for everybody other than white people.
Right.
It troubles me because,
Right.
and I find that very disempowering, and it also does not ring true for me anyway.
Right. Well, again, this critical race theory is, in terms of defining it, it can be a bit elusive, and I guess that's probably by design, being that critical race theory is, we would say, a subcategory of what we call critical theory, which is connected with postmodernist philosophy, which really prides itself on decentering sort of narratives and undermining or deconstructing what they consider to be power relations in society. But I would say that critical race theory can probably best be defined as an analytical, a list of analytical assumptions about race, racism, and domination, right, in Western societies in particular. And I would say that the goal is to create outcomes which are reflective of the numbers and or the idea or the concept of an egalitarian existence. And so when you hear something like that, most people would say, well, okay, there's nothing to object to, right, about that. And why would we not want some level of egalitarianism? Why would we not want justice or to correct certain problems which have been created by racist policies, historical policies? However, when we look at the foundational assumptions of critical race theory, among which are the idea of intersectionality and anti-essentialism. Yeah, so intersectionality is basically the idea that any given individual can be seen as oppressed from multiple perspectives, right? So, for instance, you as a woman, right, it would say, okay, well, and then also you as a Muslim, right, that you are automatically placed into the category of the oppressed because you're both a woman and you're a Muslim, right? So, and me, I am automatically placed into the category of an oppressor because of, with respect to you, because I'm a man, and perhaps it would say because I'm conservative, right? You know, in my viewpoints, right? So that sort of makes me an oppressor, right? Default, right? You know, but the greatest oppressor and the one who the group of people who are said to oppress everyone are they call cisgender or heterosexual white people, white men in particular. You know, they're at the top of this pyramid of oppression, you would say. And so often when we talk about intersectionality, what's included here is also things like sexual orientation, right? So a person heterosexual is assumed to be an oppressor of a homosexual, right? So these are sort of assumptions, and in that sense, it's not necessarily, we say race theory, but it's more again just an analytical way of deconstructing society, but also trying to reconstruct it according to a type of utopianism, which really can never really happen, right? And then the claim of anti-essentialism as being a principle of critical race theory. What that means is that you're not allowed to assume that the individual members of any particular group are the same, right? Because of the fact that, again, there are overlapping differences between people on the basis of sex or sexual orientation or political affiliation, social class. You know, so you're not allowed to assume that all Black people are the same, or that all Indian people are the same, all Chinese people, et cetera, are the same. But, you're allowed to assume that about white people, right? Which realistically is the fundamental problem, right, with critical race theory, is that while it claims to be fighting against racism, it is itself a racist ideology. It promotes and promulgates a new or a neo-racism directed towards white people as a collective.
So, from my understanding, there's this idea that white people, it basically treats white people as though they have original sin, right? Like, whether they are conscious of it or not, they are by definition racist.
Yeah, it's as if they're born. Yeah, you're born because it's like, it's what we call biological determinism, which was always the problem with the arguments about race during the Enlightenment period. Realistically, were objected to because of the suggestions of there being biological determinism. In other words, meaning that if you're a certain color, that assumes that you behave a certain way or are motivated by certain things, right? And that itself fundamentally means that you are sort of stamped, right, from the beginning to achieve or not achieve certain things. So fundamentally, after, and this is also one of the contradictions of critical race theory, is that there's a claim that race is not biological, that race is a social construct. That's all it is, right? It has nothing to do with biology, right? But then when you say, okay, all white people, right, are races, by nature, right, or innately races, then you're actually contradicting what you just stated, because if it's cultural, it can't be biological at the same time, right? So it can be a combination of both, right? It can be a combination of culture and biology, right? But to say that it's only one and not the other, and then to assume and to insist that these particular people who look like this, that they all entertain negative ideas about the people who don't look like them, right? Then that in itself is, we call biological determinism. And that in itself is unacceptable. Islamically is unacceptable, pretty much in any civilized or rational type of environment. So it's one, and so now we should go further and say that it makes it seem as if white people have original sin. Excuse me. If anything, it actually makes white people appear to be both the devil and God. Right. And
right. Yeah, because they've got that permanent status of being able to disempower everyone else.
Right. Exactly. They got all the control. They got all the power, and no one else has any power, has any control to do anything about it. Right. And so, but but at the same time, we're working to dismantle it, so which really, again, also contradicts it in terms. Is like, well, if this is a transhistorical fact, and this is something which is just simply part of the natural terrain, and white people can't do anything about it, right? Then how can you dismantle it, right? If this is just the way that things are supposed to be, and it's also a very, very anti-historical. And the thing that's interesting about this is that that this particular idea, the ideas that it entertains, or the critical race theorists entertain about white people, it's similar to the ideas that are entertained by the Nation of Islam.
I was exactly just thinking that the whole idea of the white man is the devil,
right?
And the whole separatist.
Yes, yeah. When I'm saying the fundamental difference, between the Nation of Islam and critical race theorists is that anybody who's went through the Nation of Islam experience will tell you that while the Black, nationalists among the Nation of Islam they considered white people to be the devil. They didn't obsess about white people to the extent that the critical racists do today. So blacks was like, well, yeah, the white man's the devil. There's nothing you can do. He can't be redeemed. However, I mean, and we're just going to do for self. We're not going to demand anything from him because he can't go against his nature. So we're just going to ignore him. And we're going to do for ourselves, try and sort of separate ourselves from his society and et cetera, and his systems as much as we can. But what happened with the critical race theorists is that on one hand, well, okay, the white man is the cause of all of my problems, and we're demanding that white people solve those problems, and act as if only they can actually solve those problems. You can remember, only white people can stop being racist. Only they can stop being racist. But okay, if they're naturally racist, innately racist, how can they stop? They can't change their nature, right? So there's all these interactions when it comes to critical race theory.
So do you think, because I noticed some commentators and stuff in Britain anyway, who are like professors of Black studies and things like that, I noticed that they really do respect and refer to Malcolm X a lot, right? Do you think, I don't know about this, but do you think like they kind of got stuck in the Nation of Islam phase of Malcolm X? And do you think that influenced critical race theory?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that not only Malcolm X, but multiple other civil rights leaders. I mean, you see them quote multiple Black civil rights leaders from the U.S. Who actually, they would say that they support their ideas. I mean, even Martin Luther King, when he spoke about racism, he spoke about how racism, when it's combined with power, right, that itself being the fundamental issue, right, the matter of domination, of racial domination, right, and so from that they would say, well, this is where we get our definition of racism. Right, so they'll appeal to people like Malcolm or sometimes or Martin. Even you saw it during the summer, last year's summer riots, related BLM riots, that people were posting memes where Martin Luther King talked about how riots were the voice of the voiceless. But they didn't complete the quote, because he also he also was against the riots, right? So it's selective quoting, right, of these leaders.
Yeah, because I noticed that the kind of Islam side of Malcolm X is always downplayed, and his kind of his evolution or the changes, especially towards the end of his life, are hardly acknowledged.
Well, it was
in that narrative
about this. I'm sorry to cut you off. I mean, but it was interesting about the situation or the way the many Muslims have started to utilize Malcolm is that I think if you go back to about 2015 and you see the Muslim reaction to attacks on white people, that overall you see that Muslims were actually defensive of white people. They would say, well, what are you talking about? Malcolm X, and they would hold up Malcolm X's statement about his letter from Mecca, and when he was on Hajj, and so Malcolm said this, and this is like the strength of Islam, so you can't just simply attack a whole group of people. But then once Trump became president, it seemed as if like more and more Muslims embrace critical race theory without understanding what critical race theory was, and understandably so, because again, as you mentioned at the start of this, that critical race theory, it presents ideas or things that we find to be morally, I guess you'd say, digestible, that things that we believe to be good things, right? And so they appeal to you to that. They're sort of ethos, they're making an ethical appeal, right? And sometimes pathos, the pathological appeals as well, right, through this. And so people say, oh yeah, I believe in that. Yeah, I believe the Black Lives Matter. Or yes, I believe, and we all believe that. But it's like, not understanding that the people pulling the strings have a different goal than the most of us actually do, right? That they're either individuals or materialist atheists, and they don't want a world with religion to begin with, right? So they don't want a world with God. They don't want a world with family, right? And so critical race theory just simply is a tool that for a power, right? It actually is utilized for power, right? For that elite. And add on top of that, and I guess I don't know eventually we come to the discussion of white supremacy, but that most of the individuals who are exploiting critical race theory to their advantage are white elites, right, on the left, right? So that's something that needs its own conversation with regard to the concept of white supremacy.
Yes, in your article, How Islamic is Critical Race Theory, you said that it is good at identifying problems and social inequities, but not so good at reconstructing, right?
Right.
What is this? What do critical racists see as the solution? If they're saying that, if there is this burden on white people, because they apparently hold all the power, no one apart from white people can really be racist. If it kind of otherizes white people to that extent, what do they see as the reconstruction?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. That is a good question. I mean, and so the reconstruction entails what often is called radical equality or equity, and fundamentally, it means a redistribution of economic resources, political resources, and social currency. Right. Whereas white people are expected to step down or step aside, create space for the minorities, which, of course, on one level is not an unreasonable demand to an extent, but the idea is that since you see, for instance, the wealth distribution between, say, whites and blacks is so significant, right? The blacks, they own so much less than the whites do collectively, then that in itself looks as a sign of inequality, right? And it is when you look at it, but the causes of that, those things are not really discussed in a robust and objective way, right? As always, the assumption always has to be that white people got all this wealth because of thievery, or because of some type of exploitation or domination, and because of oppression of blacks. And the same thing comes up in feminism. When we're talking about the gender pay gap, which really there's no basis for the claim that that the gender that women are paid less than men for doing the same exact job, right? But that is the called the zeitgeist. That is the orthodoxy, so political orthodoxy at the time, currently, where there's an assumption that this is true because when you put it on paper, you throw it in front of people and say, okay, well, men collectively get paid this much and women collectively get paid that much. So it has to be because of patriarchy and men holding women down, and men deciding that women should get paid only half the amount that men get paid due to when they do the same exact job, right? And so fundamentally, we look at this and people say, "Oh my, yeah, that's pretty, it's pretty obvious that there's a difference in terms of the wealth distribution between these two groups, and it has to be because of racism, it has to be because of oppression, right? And so we have to fix that, right? So white people have to give up their wealth, right, and then give some of that to blacks, and we make sure that that the amount of wealth that blacks own is commensurate with the percentage of their population, right? And the amount of wealth that whites own is commensurate with the population, their population, right? So which itself is a call for disaster. It is it's going to lead to great disaster because there's no society in history that's ever been egalitarian, right? Or those which have attempted to be egalitarian have failed, miserably, and it's led to great suffering, as we know has repeated itself over and over and over. So yeah.
What do you mean by egalitarian? Because people might think, well, are you saying people shouldn't have, you know, do you mean like the erasure of all differences? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Erasure of all differences. There should be no difference between anyone in any particular fashion. And you see it happening on multiple levels, right? Because what Muslims have to understand is that critical race theory, along with queer theory, along with feminism, that they are parts of a same family, right? And it's a neo-Marxist family, which is attempting to create, you know, of course, the so-called egalitarian type of existence or equal existence, or the erasure of difference between everyone, right? So the erasure of the family, the erasure of even gender and sex distinctions, right? Right. They want to get rid of that as well, right? And they also want to get rid of any economic disparities between people. That everyone should be getting paid the same thing. Everyone should own the same amount of wealth, right? Right. So it's radical equality, right? You know, and then the focus on outcomes rather than equal opportunity. You know, so we have been in favor. Of course, our religion promotes the importance of equal opportunity. You know, but it doesn't favor equal outcomes, you know, where everyone has to be 100% the same in every single way. Right. So yeah, that's what I.
Where we have to basically, where we have to force the outcome to be a certain way, right?
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Well, that's interesting, because there's two things I wanted to share with you, like, that have kind of troubled me in some of the influences that I've seen of these ideologies in the Muslim community. Just two examples that I've seen recently. One is a sister that I know she's a lecturer, a professor at a university in the UK. She's from an Indo-Pak background. She wears the hijab, she observes the hijab. So in a way, she's quite a iconic person, in the sense that, you know, she's made it. She's a hijabi professor at a university, right? So you would think she's somebody who should be celebrated, right, by the left and by critical race theorists.
Right.
But she was trying to launch a journal, a Muslim journal, and she put the call out for, you know, she was trying to find a great diverse editorial board, and loads of people you know, applied, etc. And then, you know, they went through the whole process, and she advertised the people who had been chosen, right? She put images of them, like photos of them, on, I think it was Twitter or somewhere.
Right.
It just so happened that there were no Black people amongst the editorial board. Okay. There were Arabs, there were, you know, Asians, there were, I don't know, people, I couldn't even tell, to be honest, what backgrounds they were. But within minutes of her tweeting the photos of the board, her Twitter account was absolutely bombarded with messages from people saying, why aren't there any Black people on this board? Couldn't you find any Black Muslims? Right. And accusing her of all sorts of things, you know, when I know personally from her that nobody had applied, right? Okay. Who had been from a Black background.
Right.
And she just happened to choose the right, you know, like people who had the qualifications and who actually applied. And she was being accused of not having done the due diligence to reach out to Black people. Okay. So there was almost like there was nothing she could do, right, to say, you know, I didn't do this on purpose. Like, I just went through a process that was very clearly advertised. And in the end, she did what so many people do. She apologized. Right. She somehow found somebody Black to be on the board. You know, I mean, I just found it ridiculous. You know, I mean, I was thinking to myself, if I was that Black person who was then chosen after all that, right, I wouldn't feel empowered. I would feel like I was there as a token. You know.
Right, exactly, right. And but the thing is interesting about this is that a lot of the Black people who actually would accept that particular role, they don't realize that they are being tokenized. They don't realize it. They actually believe that they're being chosen because of their merit, right? You know, rather than, okay, we're trying to. This is a political statement that's being made here. And so yeah, this is a big problem. We've seen it for a number of years now, where these demands are making sure that you don't have all male panels. There should be sort of equal distribution between men and women in all of these situations and management and the programs that come up. And I think that, of course, if in certain situations there may be um, some intentional efforts by certain people to ensure that certain types of people are not there. Sure. I mean, that does exist.
Yeah.
However, however, our religion is, we would say, largely a meritocracy. Yeah, it's about meritocracy and placing in the front and in positions of influence those who are qualified to be there. Yeah, this is what our religion emphasizes. I've been accused of the same thing with my own efforts, but a couple of times in the past, where people say, "Okay, where are the women? Where are the sisters?" And then again, not realizing that, okay, well, we did reach out to sisters, but we're not into tokenism. We reached out to sisters we believe who are qualified to actually play this role, and they couldn't come. Right, that they, either children, or they had some other function, or they may be sick, or problems with travel. I mean, there are a lot of different possibilities which are there. Why you don't see this? And you could, I mean, you can also say, okay, well, why are there no Filipinos there? Why are there no Sri Lankans there? Why are there no Chinese people there? Why are there no? You understand what I'm saying? You can just go on forever.
Right? You could go on forever, yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing that troubled me as well with this was a lot of the people calling this out were Muslims, and they were implying that because this sister was Indian, right, or Pakistani, that she herself had a type of privilege, because basically she wasn't at the bottom of the pile, right?
Right.
And so there was nothing she couldn't even sort of play the identity politics card and say, well, look, I'm a minority too. It didn't matter. The divisiveness that has seeped even into the Muslim community because of this, amongst races, if you want to call them that, within the Muslim community, that's really troubling. That troubles me.
Well, we've abandoned our deen. We've embraced this new ideology, not even fully understanding its history and its assumptions, its goals. The founders themselves, who were godless people, right, materialists, who had a different idea in mind with regard to what can be done with these sort of ideas. And we hardly open up the Quran or read the Sunnah anymore, if we ever have done so. And when you when you don't philosophize or don't study philosophy, then somebody's going to philosophize for you. Sheikh Hamza, in one of his quotes, say, if you don't philosophize, somebody's going to philosophize for you. And fundamentally, this is, I think, is what's happened, is that Muslims don't understand the philosophical roots of the movements that they've embraced. They don't understand the emotion. They don't understand what the goals are. What type of outcomes are we talking about? What type of even tactics and treatment of others are tolerated? Right? These things wouldn't be tolerated by the Prophet ﷺ, that you're just simply assuming or prejudging someone. I mean, there's a famous story of Usama ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhuma, when he was on the battlefield and he killed the man after he said La ilaha illallah. And when he came to the Prophet, who had heard about this, the Prophet asked him, he said, did you kill him after he said La ilaha illallah? And then Usama said, Ya Rasulullah, he was just trying to save his own life. And then the Prophet said to him again, did you kill him after he said La ilaha illallah? Did you open up his heart? Right? And so Usama said that, I wish I was born on that day after that occurrence. So So, but this is fundamentally what Muslims are doing when it's just simply, oh, the sister, it had to be because she hates black people. It has to be because, that again, she looks down on black people, and that's why she didn't do that. So, well, no explanation she can give. And the last thing you need to do is apologize. That is a big mistake.
I know.
But
unfortunately, unfortunately, the pressure is so immense that people fear losing their job, and then they fear all sorts of things.
Yeah, totally. Right.
Another incident. Another
Mm-hmm.
incident. I don't think I want to name names, but it's just something that was out there in the public sphere. And by the way, I'm not saying that there aren't things that are wrong, and there aren't people who do speak out of turn or act out of turn. And I do think that definitely because of the the history and the landscape, there is a level of sensitivity that's needed, right? However, when this incident happened, when one of the a white American scholar, he made some comments, or he was, from what I could see, he was advising people, right? He was advising the black community, and there was a big kind of fuss made about it, and accusations of white supremacy. And now maybe there's some aspect of it that I'm not aware of, I don't know, but from where I was looking at the whole thing, I found it quite embarrassing that, and it made me actually ask, like, how would people react if the Prophet ﷺ, because at the end of the day, the scholars are the warathatul anbiya, right? They're the heirs of the Prophet, so they're in the place of the Prophet ﷺ in his absence, right? They're our advisors, and they're our they're there to point out things that they see that we could change or work on. So what troubled me was similar to how when feminists say, well, men can't say anything about women, male scholars, they can't advise women, right? What would they say if the Prophet ﷺ was advising them? You're a man, you can't advise, oh, you're not black, or you're not Asian, or you're not whatever, right? And so you can't say anything. Do you think I've analyzed this a bit simplistically, or
no,
is this something
you haven't?
that...
I don't think you have at all. I mean, you analyze it in the proper way, because the goal in every interaction should be the pursuit of truth, right? And
exactly.
If we have
no matter who says it, right? No matter who says it,
right?
The truth is the truth.
Right, the truth is the truth. And that's one of the famous statements attributed to Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, كرم الله وجهه, لا تعرف الحق بالرجال بل اعرف الحق تعرف أهله. That they don't know the truth by men, rather know the truth, those who have it. So it's and that's again our deen, and that's I mean, the most advanced civilizations, they make the claim that we're pursuing truth, right? So if they pursue this truth, then it really shouldn't matter who says it, the gender, the sex of the person. It shouldn't matter the color or race of the person. So because everyone can have the truth. And the Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, as we know, he used to have special nights that he would teach the women, right? He would teach the sisters in the masjid. He would constantly advise Muslim women. And if you claim that you hate men, then I guess you hate your father, and then you have to hate the Prophet. I mean, how can you possibly, you believe that that's reconcilable with Islam? That you can reconcile with Islam, this idea that you hate men, or you hate the member of a particular race. Like you hate Arabs, for instance. How can you hate Arabs but not hate the Prophet, right? You can't. You shouldn't even be saying such things, right? Because that's
even if not hate. If you're saying that men are necessarily oppressive of women, right? If you're saying white people are necessarily, even if they're Muslim, even if they're like of any background, and they are necessarily racist, or they have some element of white privilege or white supremacy in them, then even if you don't hate them, just that accusation itself means that you're saying that it's impossible for a white person to ever advise you know, a non-white person, or
Yeah.
for a man to advise a woman.
Yeah. So again, it's biological determinism, right? So it's sometimes it's on the level of race, sometimes it's on the level of gender, right? So this idea that certain, sexes, they can't help it, that this is just the way that they are. Certain races, they can't help it, this is just the way that they are. And if we, again, coming back to CRT, which claims that you should not essentialize anybody, meaning you should treat every individual. You shouldn't assume that every individual member of a group is the same, right? But this is the default. This is what happens. We do it with white people, but then sometimes we do it with men. Feminists do it with men. The critical race theorists do it with white people, right? And perhaps I really can't say too much about the transgender community, but I would assume that something similar is there with regard to so-called cisgender people. This idea, some ideas that they entertain about, what they call cisgender or heterosexual people, right? Also, like, of course, the gays and others, right? So fundamentally, it's a problem, and it's unscientific. This isn't a very unscientific sort of way of dealing with people. It's pseudoscience, I would even say. It's pseudoscience, and just really, it has no basis in reality, right? So,
Dr. Abdullah, like, could it be argued though, like, that certain races or certain people of certain backgrounds, like even myself as an Indian person from an Indian heritage, we do have blind spots regarding other communities, right? Like, obviously, that's kind of, and same with white people. They could have certain blind spots with other communities, and they've had a different maybe experience of. Also, it depends on like which kind of social status they have as well, right? Like, I mean, there's so many factors. So human beings.
And the same thing for minorities too, for Black people and others. Everybody has blind spots.
Right. Blind spots about the other, right?
Exactly, right. So we all prejudge. We have been wired. This is the way Allah created us. I mean, there's certain things we call, but they're biological facts, right? And we can't help but to judge, right? We do judge, we prejudge, but we resist the assumptions, right? Or making those judgments or assumptions to influence the way that we treat somebody, right? We might be right about our prejudgment, right? But we don't want to make the error, right, in discovering that we were wrong, right? So we treat people a certain way until our prejudgment proves to be correct, right? And because if it's incorrect, then it's can be really disastrous, right? So that's our Islam, that's our deen, and I think that's also just common, or what used to be sort of common sense or common ethics, that human beings shared across civilizations. So, but today we see something else developing.
Dr. Abdullah, you said in your article Beyond Racism that, I think it was in another article, that Islam has a transformative and conciliatory spirit. But you did also highlight, like, although the Quran and Sunnah are unequivocal about, racism, obviously throughout Muslim history, there have been situations, times, like, for example, you highlighted during Umayyad times, higher taxes on the Persians, for example, who are not Black, but, they were a different ethnic background to Arabs. And then Abbasid times, certain policies, racist policies against Black people, I believe in Iraq. And you highlighted that some scholars even wrote books, like the 13th century scholar Ibn al-Jawzi, Hanbali scholar, that kind of talking about the virtue of Black and Ethiopian people. So basically seemingly trying to counter an anti-Black trend that had developed. Is that what you think it was?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things I'll say about this. First and foremost, with respect to the transformative nature of Islam and its conciliatory nature, is that this is something which has been well acknowledged throughout Islamic history, even by non-Muslims. So for instance, and I like to often mention this, is like, Gandhi, had some very positive things to say about Islam, and actually praised Islam over his own religion, Hinduism, and talked about the contribution of Islam to India, right? Being among the things being this brotherhood, right? The sense of brotherhood or true brotherhood in Islam that you don't find amongst functional Hinduism, and then of course Tawheed. He mentions, our uncompromising belief in true monotheism, right? And he talks about, okay, so Hindus, they claim the same thing, but their monotheism is a bit more polluted, right? So there's Gandhi, speaking about like Islam, and as a matter of fact, there's a Black American scholar from the civil rights era called by the name of Dr. Howard Thurman. He has multiple books and treatises he's written, and he in one of his books he talks about he visited India to meet Gandhi. Gandhi actually was surprised that he was not Muslim. He was like, "Well, how are you Christian?" Right? So he said, "Well, no, I'm not. I'm not Muslim. I'm a Christian." And
sorry, what was his name? Sorry, the person who.
Dr. Howard Thurman. Dr. Howard Thurman, and I think it's in his one book, Luminous Darkness. I think it's called Luminous Darkness. In his book, he mentioned this in one of his chapters. He visits Gandhi, and Gandhi tells him, well, it seems to make more sense to you to be Muslim because the religion of Muhammad is the only one that teaches race egalitarianism, right? And it's actually true. And then Howard Thurman goes on to say after this, well, Gandhi did have a point, right? He did have a point when he said this. Historians like Arnold Toynbee, Thomas Carlyle, very praiseworthy like words about Islam, and how Islam, especially in the area of race, is actually the only religion that actually can solve the race problem, right? They don't. No one's praised any other religion in this particular regard, but all of a sudden Muslims, have abandoned that for something different. We've chosen something other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, but I can't remember. What was the other part of your question? I'm sorry. So I saw
so I think you've made it really clear that obviously Islam doesn't promote racism. In fact, it does the opposite. But you highlighted that obviously Muslims, being fallible and even throughout in their history, have had some
Right. Yeah. So I think this is important. This is an important discussion to have about, like, of course, the difference between the ideal and the reality.
Right.
And human beings are always going to be imperfect, naturally, and this is what I mean when I say Islam is transformative. Transformative meaning that you're coming from something to something new, right? That you have issues, and so after becoming a Muslim and submitting yourself to Allah, do you work through that baggage? You drop the baggage as you become more committed to Islam. But that doesn't but in the process of that, people are still carrying their baggage. So naturally, you will see this historically, but still Islam has the proper way to treat these issues. And I think what needs to be understood is that while race, as we know it today, or we think about it today, was different back then, right? Understood it, that anti-Black antipathy is transhistorical, right? In other words, what I mean is that even what I mean by Black is this: I don't mean Black as understood in America, right, or perhaps as understood in Britain, right, where you have someone who's looks fairly light skinned. Some people are tan, some people are light brown, some people are dark brown. But in Black, we mean Black, right? So like when in our sources, the Hadith and any other source of Islam, when they say Black, what they're talking about are sub-Saharan Africans. They're talking about people who actually have Black skin. So they're not talking about people all shades, right? First and foremost. That doesn't justify sort of the antipathy, and maltreatment. But I'm just making the point that we have to be very clear that when we read the works of different scholars like Ibn Khaldun or Mas'udi, that they're not talking about blackness as we understand it today, right? First and foremost. But the idea that that anti-blackness or anti-darker skin is a transhistorical fact, I do think that that there's enough evidence to embrace this idea, because, for instance, you can go back to ancient China of and it's still the case today, 3,500 years ago in China, you have, the northern Chinese discriminated against the southern Chinese who are darker, right? On the basis of their skin, or happened in India, the Brahmins against the Dravidians. Dravidians are darker, right? So they were mistreated on the basis of their skin, right? Skin color, right? So when you come to the East African or the Sub-Saharan African, the East African, of course, the Arabians have more dealing with the East African, but they were still Sub-Saharan. That when you find it mentioned in the Hadith or mentioned in many of the ancient books of Islamic law or theology, black, they're talking about Sub-Saharan people. They're not talking about individuals who are tan or brown, because the Arabs themselves were largely brown people, right? During the time, right? So they're not talking about, blackness as we understand it in the American context, where we have the one drop rule, and you discovered that you have any amount of African blood, even if you look almost white, quote unquote, that you're still black, right? So they're not talking about that. So that's the first thing. Outside of that, we can call this, I could say, colorism, right? But colorism, again, was not universal. It's still people in the past, and especially there for most of Islamic history and for most of history, they didn't define themselves on the basis of their color, but collectively, they didn't define themselves on the basis of color. They defined themselves on the basis of shared cultural artifacts, right? Shared history, shared practices, shared religious beliefs. This is how they identified, right? So and for that reason, like the Arabs themselves, the people they considered to be white, right, were the Persians, the Syrians, and the Europeans. Right? Those are what they call white, right? And they actually didn't call them white; they called them red, right? Yeah. And they didn't call them white because in the language of the Arabs, when you called someone white, it meant you had what is called vitiligo, right, which is a discoloration, a loss of pigmentation in the skin, right? So all the loss of melanin. Which lets you know
it's like you'd lost your color, right? Basically.
Right, exactly, right. Which also again reinforces the fact that most of the Arabs were people who were melanated people, right? So they considered it to be a pejorative, like you can't call. I'm not white. What do you mean I'm white, right? I'm not white. So, but they didn't consider they weren't Africans either. They were not the Europeans nor Africans, right? And they didn't self-identify as white, right? So this is often missed by people, right? And so as you're reading books, or certain people read in books of Islamic, like you can find this more easily in Maliki law books, for instance, and they speak about, and some of the Maliki theologians as well, you find mention of Black people, right? And somewhat of a disparagement of Black skin, right? That again, once again, they're not talking about American Black, with all of the different, the kaleidoscope of different tones and things like that. They're talking about African, right? Sub-Saharan African. This is really what they're talking about. And again, that doesn't justify it, but this is really, they have a specific type of person or look in mind when they're making certain derogatory statements or speaking of Black women, as ignoble, a part of an ignoble class, and this is not all Malikis as well. That's the other thing. This is a mistake that certain people are making today. That I've seen some of this play out recently, where even in particular, some people from the UK, I see them in interviews and they're talking about, okay, what's happening in the classroom or is happening and Maliki works of a certain Muslim books, and they speak about the Maliki works. That they make this mistake to think, the people who are listening think, okay, Black people, if I consider myself to be Black, then this book or this author is talking about me too, right? And so, but there's a way to actually understand what's happening here, and most people are just not sophisticated enough to really get why the scholars would say those things, or even, I mean, of course, some of the time, some of the statements are inexcusable, but other statements are somewhat understandable from a cultural standpoint, which really we don't have enough time to really go into during this interview. But we all will have our failings. We all have our failings, right? But the same xenophobia that is expressed against blacks by these scholars from these certain parts of the world, the blacks also entertain the same type of xenophobia towards them, right? So this is what I'm talking about. It's a two-way street, because this is just that pre-modern world, right? And Africa has never been a monolithic culture or civilization. Africans have always see themselves as distinct from other Africans. So the claim or the assumption that they have itself is anachronistic, right? Transhistorical is actually historical.
So where do you think that colorism comes from? That's a big question, I know. But
I mean, the etiology of it is debated. I mean, some I know, like one scholar who says that maybe, like Dr. Khalid Blankenship, who teaches at Temple University in Philadelphia. In conversation I've had with him before, and then some of the things he's written to me, like email, he's talked about how, I don't know, maybe it comes from the fear of things going thump in the night, in the dark, because people are scared of the dark, and maybe this is something that was sort of inculcated within the human being in light of that, because of fear of the dark, or fear of the sounds that are out in the nighttime, and just and maybe that's what sort of started there. So over time, people associated evil things with the night because you can't see, and then often people get hurt during the nighttime. So, and maybe that was just projected onto the human being as well. We saw these people are dark like the night, therefore they're evil, right? But you find
because this is before evolution, right? Like before the whole kind of
I guess,
and it's also before colonialism, when obviously during colonialist times there was a proper hierarchy put in place in terms of color, right? But you're saying even before that, in societies.
I think that there definitely was a type of hierarchy, of color, of colorism, but I don't think there's enough evidence to say that most places on the earth that they discriminated or they denied certain rights to people simply on the basis of them being darker, right? Except for in this, again, we know certain cases. I mentioned the ancient China and also India as well, so you do have these examples. But for the most part, I don't think there's enough evidence to conclude that in most places that people were mistreated or denied freedom, or denied the opportunity to ascend to other offices simply because they were dark people. And we have in the Islamic tradition, we know that being black didn't mean that you were a slave, right? That's not something
it wasn't synonymous at all.
That's not being a slave, and many former slaves in Islamic history became great people. Get great scholars, and they would had many students. Some of them became governors of countries, like the Mamluks, for instance. These Turkish slaves, former Turkish slaves who ruled Egypt, and the Ikhshidi dynasty. They were the Africans, the sub-Saharan peoples who had ruled as well. So in the Islamic context, they weren't, for most of our history, were not denied a type of, we call the postmodernists call agency, right? Which is the opportunity to ascend to greater things. So
I think you called it upward mobility, right?
Yes, upward mobility, right? Exactly. So whereas in the European context, it was different. It was different, So especially after they decided that only blacks could be slaves. So there was really no more upward mobility, and we even see it after Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War, American Civil War, that many of the gains of blacks were just simply rolled back by, the racist whites, for much of the 20th century until the late 60s, right, when a lot of these things started to improve, right? So there definitely have been many failings, right, in multiple civilizations. Muslim civilizations had failures, but compared to European civilizational failures with regard to race and racism, I think there's no comparison between the two. If we're allowed to make those type of comparisons, but again, people will fail, right? People are imperfect, right? And so Islam is what makes us more perfect, and we have to remember that everybody's redeemable. So, and I do think that when we even talk about like white, black, etc., that that fundamentally what we are doing to an extent is reinforcing what what we call white supremacy, right? I'm not saying we don't utilize these terms for convenience, right? What we need to understand is that race, the word race itself, is not a scientific term. Like, scientists don't consider race to be a scientific term. It's a social scientific term, which really, again, it's not like hard science or like biological science, but it's a convenient term. The convenient terms utilized to describe people. And during the Enlightenment period, starting with scholars, like Swedish scholar by the name of, or known as Carl Linnaeus, like, he was the first one to classify human beings on the basis of color, right? And but his classification was radical, not because simply he placed people in different colors. He said the human race, there are four races. You have the white race, the black race, the red race, and the yellow race. And so that itself was unproblematic. But what he went further to do was that he associated with each color certain motivations and certain behaviors, right? Right. Yeah. And that was fundamentally the problem, right? And this is around the same time that, for instance, America is forming, the Declaration of Independence, and then eventually the first Naturalization Act under George Washington, where they stipulated that if you wanted to be an American, that one of the important factors that you had to be a white person. Right, and during this time, that didn't include Italians and Irish and the Jews and many other Europeans, right? Largely, we're talking about the Anglo-Saxon, right, which is meant. Now, some people would say, okay, well, this is what proves that America was founded upon racism, and to an extent, there's truth to that, But what else would they have founded it upon when we consider the fact that the American revolutionaries, they were trying to create a new type of society, which was not connected with the monarchy in England, and what they associated with tyranny, and they had just simply went through more than 100 years of war, of civil war between the Protestant and Catholic churches, with great bloodshed between them, right? And they said, well, no, we can't create a country and say that citizenship is based upon religion. So they just chose, okay, well, we'll choose whiteness, right? And so, what else would they have chosen, right? To an extent, and you kind of have to just get over that, to an extent, is that, because especially when we consider that there's an evolution that happened in American history, and then perhaps even the UK or England. So it's oversimplistic explanations that are really harming us, that there's no nuance involved, right, with a lot of these ideas that we are promoting and then utilizing to further divide the human species, right? So we don't realize this, and I think that it's really bad, especially being that Muslims are supposed to be witnesses over humanity. That وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. That we are supposed to be the best ummah, خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. right, and the most beneficial, خير الناس أنفع الناس للناس, right? So the best people are those who are most beneficial and useful to other people, right? So we have to be beneficial, right? We can't be, I guess you'd say, people who are oracles of doom, right? Because fundamentally, that's why we're doing when you embrace critical theory, you embrace the woke culture overall, LGBTQ advocacy, and then of course many of the more toxic aspects of feminism, right? So I think that we're just really following, as the prophet talked about it, the day would come that we would follow those who came before us into the lizard's hole, and this is exactly what we're doing. We're not leading, we're following.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, I mean, so what's the way forward? I mean, like, I'm just thinking, fast forward to today. The Muslim community in America, in Britain, people of all sorts of backgrounds. Recently, somebody I know, they organized a Black Muslim festival, right? Online. and when I had a conversation about it, I could see where that person was coming from, okay? And the argument was, well, look, the majority of Muslims in the UK are Indo-Pakistani, right? And therefore, when you have events, when you have even like media, Islam channel, or whatever, whatever media and whatever events and platforms that you have, the default ends up being Indian, Pakistani people, right? Mainly because they're the majority, I guess, and so we need a space where we can, I don't know, create a platform for Black people. I think the argument was something like that. Although the organizer was quite surprised because the speakers didn't really want to talk about anything to do with being Black. And they were all from very different backgrounds. They didn't even, like, somebody from Africa is not the same as somebody brought up in Britain, and somebody like from a Jamaican background or from an Afro-American background. I don't even think people call themselves Afro-Americans anymore, do they? I think it's
No, I don't.
Black Muslims, or
Black,
I don't know.
Black Americans is probably more
Black
popular.
Americans, right? So I think they realized that actually there was little reason to kind of, create that platform, because there was nothing really, apart from being Black or having a certain skin tone. There was nothing really unifying the various peoples. But I want to know what you think about that. I mean, is there a place for things like that? Maybe there is.
Yeah, I actually have organized, I believe, 3 conferences. We call the Black American Muslim Conference, and the last one we had was online during 2020. It was the first one we had online. The other 2 were actually in physical location. And originally, the thinking was that we need to bring together the voices of the Black leaders, national leaders, or the influencers in American society, because we weren't pleased with the direction we felt that the quote unquote immigrant community or organizations were taking us Islamically in the country. And we wanted to preserve that original, authentic Black American voice and courage, which is connected with our civil rights leaders and legacy, right? And so that, Islam wouldn't just simply become a culture, which it seemed that we call the immigrant organizations seem to be taking Islam to becoming. And so the idea was that, okay, we want to come together, bring these people together, put them on stage, have multiple panel discussions about multiple topics to reveal the diversity of thought and ideology in the Black community. That's for the very first thing, because remember, with critical race theory, their claim is that they're anti-essentialists, and no one should assume that the members of any group are all the same, right? So we wanted to reveal that. Okay, well, there's there's diversity of ideology in our community. You know, I mean, among the Muslims themselves, and in American history, after the Civil War and during Reconstruction, that there were two basic paradigms that developed, you know, and actually developed prior to the Civil War among free blacks. And one particular paradigm was the integrationist paradigm. You know, like Frederick Douglass, he represented this, and he was like, "Well, listen, this is our home. We're going to stay here. We're going to try to make it work." And then you had his colleague Martin Delany, who was actually the first. He was a military doctor who was commissioned by Lincoln into field command. And Richard Delany's position was different. Martin Delany was different in that he said, "Okay, listen, these people, they don't want us here. We need to go back to Africa." Right. So you had to sort of back to Africa movement, and then there's sort of sub paradigms from that, with the separatist paradigm, which you have people like Booker T. Washington who were like, "Okay, well, we live here, but we're not trying to integrate with white people." Right? And he actually expressly said that to white people. He said, "Listen, we're not trying to integrate with you. We're trying to clean ourselves up and build ourselves up, and we just need your support." You know, and they actually donated to his effort, right? To white people donated to his effort to improve that. And so the Nation of Islam, for instance, especially during the Elijah Muhammad days, represented that separatist nationalist paradigm, right? And in many ways, the Nation of Islam was the most successful Black American movement, right, in American history, right, with regard to unification, actually, and helping people to feel, you know, that they were confident and they had good self-esteem and that they can do pretty much anything. On the other hand, the integrationist paradigm was represented later represented by, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King, and so the NAACP as well, and people like W.E.B. Du Bois, and so they focus on civil rights issues, about trying to gain equality with white people, right? And so, at any rate, the whole point, coming back to the Black American Muslim Conference, is that I tried to invite people who represented both paradigms as well, right? You know, but who happen to be Muslims. You know, we try to bring them together. We can sit on stage, we have these conversations, we can have debates even, right? But we can show the audience, you know, how you can actually have a mature debate between, you know, of course, intelligent people, and hopefully that'll teach, you know, the general attendees on how to have, like, you know, mature conversations. So that was one of the goals, is to do that. But what happened is that some of the people who represented different paradigms, that in particular, there's some people from our community who are critical race theory. They're very comfortable with LGBTQ, etc., who didn't agree with me philosophically, like me, for instance, philosophically, and they turned down my invitation to attend. And then again, and eventually what happened was that, you know, COVID happened, and then certain other more and more people started to sort of pull away from the program, that you know, we decided, you know, it's really pointless at this right now to actually continue these type of programs, because the goal is very difficult to be achieved now, with so many people embracing critical race theory, and a type of intolerance, in this sort of intolerance that doesn't allow for valid, you know, disagreement or difference of opinion, right? So I think that.
Do you mean because you're seen as, like, conservative? Is that why? Like,
right, exactly. The more people saw me as conservative, you know, the more they did not want to become involved. And I was like, okay, well, don't come because of me. Come because all the other people who are not conservative, right? You know, and come to engage with them, right? Don't just put the base all on me, right? Yeah. So, so as people start identifying with me more with being conservative, then as if like a black man is not allowed to be conservative.
Conservative, right? Yes.
Right. Then it really is really, you know, and I actually wouldn't class myself as politically conservative. People sort of mistake in my sharing of, like, Fox News videos, and, you know, and expressing support for much of what Trump has stood for. that people interpret that as mean that I'm a Republican, that I believe in the Republican establishment. And I say, no, I don't at all. I believe in shaking up the establishment. Right? I supported Ron Paul and his run for president before, but he never made it to, of course, the what we call the finals or whatever you call it. I can't remember the term we use for it in politics. But he didn't make it that far, and I just didn't vote that particular year. But I've only voted twice in my life, right? And I voted for Obama once, and his first term, and then the other time I voted for Trump. Yeah, I did. I voted for Trump the last time because I felt that his platform, he had proven himself to be better, right, or more supportive of the interests that I felt that a committed Muslim, right, should be supportive of, right, and the left was antithetical, right. I felt that their platform would undermine Islam, undermine religion overall, right, and I couldn't support that, right. So and in politics you have trade-offs. Right. So in politics, I believe someone said to me a long time ago that in politics, there are no permanent friends or enemies. There are only permanent interests. That's all you have in politics, right? So you have trade-offs.
Actually, you know what I meant by conservative? I meant like I don't know, like Zaytuna would be probably classed as like a neo-traditionalist institution.
Right.
So I meant Islamically relatively conservative,
Yeah. For me, it's like, okay, well, how can I think that any committed Muslim is conservative, right? So I mean, how can you be being a conservative, right? So but I understand that a lot of those, that of course Republicans made it, and the political conservatives made it difficult for a lot of Muslims to embrace it. But at any rate, the whole point, coming back to the original question about those type of conferences, the sort of black oriented or black focused conferences, I think that probably most of them are not useful, right? Either for the blacks who attend or for the Muslims overall, right? Unless again, you actually articulate a clear program, which, like we would say that, listen, everybody's invited. This is not only for black people. We said this is for everybody, because we want you to understand our experience as well, right? We want you to understand our history, our experience, and get our point of view as well. And maybe it'll help you to develop, a better strategy for, dealing with the national population as well, right? So that's what we would do. We and there were some people who were resistant at first, similar to yourself, but there's one person and one brother I know, I remember he finally came, and then he really felt good about coming. He was really happy. But at first he was afraid because he felt, oh, this is like just another form of identity politics, and
or division. It's just that sense of division,
Right. Exactly.
Like you said, reinforcing the race stuff,
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. But I mean, at this moment, like we've discontinued the conference for the time being. Personally, I don't have any plans to return to it, because of the fact that, it just seems that most Muslims are critical race theorists. The people, they're embracing critical race theory, and that's, not exactly what, I want to become the norm, personally, and and I'm not sure if anybody will even come now. Many of those people who, who I invited in the past, because again, they don't. Well, I guess for some reason they feel that I'm not allowed to be who I am, right? That I have to be who they want me to be.
I thought it was all about giving people agency, right?
Right. Exactly.
As long as you choose what we want you to choose, right?
Right.
Something
exactly.
like that.
Right. Yeah. So, and again, that's an interesting point here, because this is what's at the root of again, of a lot of what we call racism today. So there's a tendency to think that only people on the right are racist, and the people on the left, they are our friends. But the people on the left, right, white and otherwise, in my view, they are the racists. They're the true racists, because they're the ones who actually keep telling us that as a black person or as a minority person, that your your story or your experience is defined by your victimhood, right? Right. That you can't do anything because of us, right? I mean, the white people leftists, white leftists, like, you can't do anything because of us, but we're going to help you as well, and we're going to make sure that you get what you want. In other words, you begin by assuming that the other person is inferior, right? That I'm in a superior place than you are. Recently, I was having a conversation with a brother, a friend of mine, an Afghan brother, and I remember he said to me, he says, that black people are poor. And I said, brother, that's not true. He said, no, they are. Yes, they are poor. I said, come on, man, I'm black. And it's like, yeah, you talking about, they are not poor. I said, listen, there's a large minority of black people, between 20 and 25%, who qualify as poor, right, in the United States, right? Which means the 75 to 80% of blacks do not qualify as poor, which means that they are the middle class or they're rich, right? Right. But the message we keep receiving is that black people are just a whole bunch of poor people who've been disenfranchised by the system, and that they can't do anything for themselves, right? And everything, all their problems are a result of what white people did to them, right? And those same white people who continue to emphasize these things to them, they're the ones who keep saying that we're going to pull you up, we're going to make things better for you. Those on the right are saying, no, you can do whatever I can do, right? They're treating me as an equal, right? But you tell me that they're being racist, right? Because they say pull myself up by the bootstraps. And every time I ask someone, like a black person who said that there's systemic racism, institutional racism, and structural racism that is keeping me down, it's keeping black people from doing better, I say to them, I used to ask the question, okay, tell me what is it that you want to do that you can't do because of white supremacy and structural racism? No one has given me an answer to today, right? That there's one particular thing they want to do, they can't do because of racism, because it doesn't exist anymore, right? Those obstacles, those barriers don't exist anymore. We acknowledge that they did exist for much of American history. They did exist, right? And racism is real, right? We acknowledge that as well, right? And we also acknowledge that it is possible for institutions to have negative impacts on populations, and in particular, certain racial populations more than other racial populations. We acknowledge that can happen and has occurred in the past, right? But at the same time, if you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, engineer, you want to travel, you want to move into an all-white neighborhood, nothing's keeping you from doing any of those things. For going to university, nothing's keeping you from doing any of that. But it's starting a business, nothing keeping you from doing that other than yourself, right? Yeah. And so we can't automatically we default to, oh, it's racism, right? That the racism is racism, I can't do this. Or when a white police officer kills a black person, the default is that, oh, the only reason he did that was because he hates black people. I said, well, how do you know that? How do you know that? You don't even know the circumstances leading up to the shooting, right? And people don't get that most the shootings that happens, actually, cops say they take out their guns more often against white men than against blacks, right? So people don't know these things, right? So
is that true?
Yes, right. So it's there's certain crimes that, like, for instance, aggravated assaults and simple assault that white people, they're more common among white people than black people, right? But murder is more common among black men than among white men, right? And most of those people murdered, by black men are other black men, and just as most of those are murdered by white men or white people are the white people, right? It makes sense that it works out that way. But most of the murders there are more murders committed by blacks than any other group of people in the United States, and this is just simply a fact. People think that's racism to mention that, but it's like, no, it's just simply stating a fact, right? And it doesn't mean that black people overall right? That most Black people are murderers. It doesn't mean that, because that's I think this is what people process. Is unfortunately that they hear it and they say, "Oh, you're basically saying that Black people are murderers. That most Black people are murderers." No, we're not saying that. The criminal element among Blacks is a minority of a minority, right? And so it's an extremely small number, but they wreak havoc, right? So. But most Black people are not criminals, right? Most Black people are not murdering people. Most Black people are not selling drugs. Most Black people are not going to prison, right? See, so that itself, those ideas have to be removed, right, from people's minds, because those assumptions are what, again, they're racist assumptions, right? So again, my friend who says that to me, I'm just like, brother, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. And I can pull up the stats and show them to you right now, right? That's actually not true. And that's propaganda that's been put out there. And unfortunately, enough Blacks, so many Blacks actually like to buy into the victim narrative. It's convenient for them that it makes it easy for a non-Black to say, okay, oh yeah, Black people are oppressed and they've been oppressed and they're still oppressed, and they really can't do anything about it.
When you're talking about American police and their treatment of Black people, especially like George Floyd, for example, right? Couldn't there be an argument for the fact that because of the racism, that does still exist in society, Black people who are arrested, like George Floyd, there's a tendency to because of the dehumanization, there's a tendency to treat them worse. I'm just saying this because, like, I'm probably in a position of ignorance here in Britain. It was all over the news here as well. But like seeing the images, seeing, what happened, and I have a gut feeling that, a white person would not be treated in such a inhumane way, and there's a certain type of permission giving that society gives to people to treat Black people in that way. Do you think I'm wrong about that, or?
I think largely you are wrong. I think that, and those others who make this argument, I think largely are wrong as well, because again, we have a media that has decided that the new enemy is white people. It used to be Muslims, it used to be Blacks, it used to be Latino people. And the establishment has decided that now we're going to target, in particular, certain types of white people, that they're the new enemy. And for that reason, what they show us on TV are only these cases where Blacks are being killed by white cops. You don't see the cases when.
So you're saying it's selective. It's selective.
Yeah. Yes, it's very, very much selective. And the other part of it is that we ignore how those situations begin, right? Because again, and I'm not justifying, what happened, right? But I think that it's still debatable about what caused the death of George Floyd. But we know the conviction has occurred currently, but that potentially could be overturned because of certain things that have come out. But George Floyd, he committed the crime, and there are others similar to George Floyd who committed a crime prior to this. And this what brought the police into the situation. We don't look at that, and George Floyd is a very extreme example, right? It's a very difficult example to talk about and to try to justify, because again, he had already gone unconscious, and the man, he remained on him. And he was already high, and he was complaining about so much he couldn't breathe, and whatever. But of course, an officer doesn't know, if those things are fake or they're real. So you do have to give some leeway to this, because officers, most of who they deal with are criminals. That's who they deal with on a regular basis, right? And they're used to criminals lying to them. So, and people miss that part as well. I used to work in prison. I'm familiar with some of law enforcement. A lot of certain things that they do, and their tactics and the attitude as well, right? So
I was going to ask you, do American police treat other people of different ethnicities in that same
Yeah,
in that same way?
statistically, the latest research has proven that there's statistically no difference in the way that black suspects are treated compared to white suspects. You know, that's the latest research. Even people on the left have to admit to this, right? You know, it's not of course the dominant narrative still, you know, but the research is very clear that there's no indication that blacks are treated worse than white suspects. And then also there's actually more information proving that police are much more hesitant to shoot black people than they are to shoot the whites. Whites are killed more every year than blacks are. You know, now people often would say, well, disproportionately. You know, I mean, of course they have more of them because there are more white people in the country. I said, but that itself is besides the fact, which is that that whites themselves, when we look at the raw numbers, the numbers are double the amount of number of black people killed by cops every single year. And then the other part too, we have to consider the fact that the up to 40% of the murders are happen in the United States are committed by black people. So and there's not that percentage of white people committing the amount of murders. So there are these things that sort of, you know, that make you sort of bounce back and forth on these type of issues. And then so it's not what people claim it to be. And then the other part is that about 80% or more of the people who are killed by police every single year are people who are either they had some weapon or they are resisting arrest or they are threatening the lives of the officers. You know, so the vast majority of people who are killed by police every single year, and they're black, white, Hispanic, and others, right? That those individuals who are wielding some type of weapon, you know, so it's not a situation where the cops are just out, they're talking about they're hunting down black people. This is exaggeration, this hyperbole that people utilize to sort of score points, you know, with certain black people who feel, again, the strong need to be loved, you know, and to be respected, you know, that itself is just untrue. It's untrue. The numbers say something different. They tell us a totally different story, and the media is very selective. They're very selective about what they show us. You know, you don't see the many situations where cops, sometimes black cops, killing white people. Right? It does happen. You know? So, but they're not going to put that on television because it doesn't fit the narrative. Because again, they want to maintain that solid voter base, right? You know, the committed voter base, you know, that never leaves the Democrat Party. You know, and the establishment, they're pro-Democrat. Right? You know, they control most of the media, about 90% or more of the media, and they control the academy. You know, the academic institutions as well.
I was going to ask you, like, isn't there such thing as you know, like inherited trauma, in the sense that, you know, if a community was, you know, brutalized and was subject to racist policies for centuries, right? Right. Isn't there an argument for, well, look, you know, those policies and then the Jim Crow laws and then, you know, all of that. There is some, it's not to say that, you know, that people don't have the ability to rise above, you know, difficult circumstances, etc. But to say that, look, you can't completely ignore the historical legacy, you know, of what happened to black people in America. Isn't there an argument for that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there definitely is a such thing as inherited trauma. But I do think we need to talk about the cause of that inherited trauma, right? You know, now, of course, people will automatically say this is because of race, because of slavery. These are the part of the legacy of slavery, you know. But there's less evidence for that than other things, you know. So, for instance, the media, Hollywood, right? They've reinforced these ideas for so long. They conditioned black people into believing, or a lot of black people into believing, that the way things were still are today, right? They haven't changed. And then those who are actually in charge of the media and Hollywood, that these are, again, the same leftists the Democrats in particular in our context, who actually are in charge of the inner cities, right? Yeah, that again, this is not a pro-conservative or pro-Republican sort of type of argument I'm trying to make here. And I know Republicans do make this argument, but people have to come to terms that if there is institutional racism, it's not being perpetuated necessarily by the conservatives. It's being perpetuated by the Democrats or those who are the leftists themselves. That they're the ones who are perpetuating it because they've been in charge of the inner cities, Black and Latino inner cities, for decades now, and nothing has improved. They're in charge. They've been in charge of the police. They've been in charge of all the schools and the systems, or whatever, right? And then we add on top of the media and Hollywood, the academy, right, as well. When you have, for instance, in the 1960s, when critical race theory actually is born, right? That eventually this becomes the norm. We see where it is right now. That critical race theory is now being embraced by government institutions. Right? This is how far it's gone. That they have, the U.S. military, CIA, the federal government, right? That they're embracing critical race theory. You see that all these ideas being reinforced, it keeps the trauma, right? Sort of, right in front of people's faces, right? But if you ask the average Black person, right, if white supremacy is so severe, so significant, in your life, when was the last time you ran into a skinhead? When was the last time that you had a run-in with a KKK member? Right? You understand? People are not, having regular interaction with the so-called overt racist people. They're only being shown things on the television screen, right? And then they're given a narrative, a caption's being attached to it. They begin a narrative. Here's a white cop kills a Black person, and the only reason is because of racism, right? And what the media has done also is that they've stopped showing those negative films and reports about violence in the Black neighborhood, which they were actually showing prior to Trump winning office, right? Because prior to that, again, movies, Boys in the Hood, and all these other, the crazy gang movies, right? And then hip hop itself is a very negative culture add on top of that. So you have some things about Black culture, or what is considered to be mainstream Black culture, but then you also have the leftist institutions reinforcing the narrative about Black victimhood, right? And fundamentally, what that does is it guarantees a solid and unshakable voter base, right? Because up to about 80% of Black Americans vote Democrat, right? So because they understand that most Black people, well, a lot of Black people, I think it's most Black people care very much about what people think about them. That we care. We have a very deep hunger to feel loved by other people, right? And so these leftists they take advantage of this and say, okay, well, so and so is a race, they don't like Black people, so you shouldn't vote for them, right? Right? So okay, I'm not voting for them. So and so said something racist about Black. They used the N-word one time, right? So no, I'm not voting for that person. And so this just for our sort of dumbing down of the population overall, not just Black people, but our educational system is falling apart as well, and it makes it everyone easy prey to be manipulated in this particular fashion, right? So again, the point I'm making is that yes, there is intergenerational trauma, right? Or put it like this: those Blacks living today are more traumatized than the Blacks from the generations before, right? Because again, the Blacks right after slavery, they didn't feel that they couldn't do something to make life better for themselves. They actually did. They worked hard to make life better for themselves. And the generation after that did the same thing. It's only now that all these Blacks are like, oh, hey, a lot of complaining about, again, the wealth disparities, but nobody ever wants to talk about, okay, well, what type of career did you choose for yourself, right? What did you go to university for? Right, what are you studying in university? So you complain about, okay, the how much white men are making, or white people are making, but are you going into engineering? Are you going into medicine? Are you starting your own business, right? Or are you going into ethnic studies? Are you going into humanities? These things, or you're going to philosophy, right? These are not high-paying jobs, right? What about that, right? What about those type of decisions? Why are that not as many people going into engineering or going into IT, right? So those are, those are the type of questions that you can't really ask, or people don't want to answer, because fundamentally it puts them in the hot seat, right? So, but there are those important questions, right? There has to be nuance. We can't reduce everything to a single factor of racism, right? I call it single factorism, right? A causation, single factorism, causation, which is almost never like true, right? That something can be just simply reduced to a single factor. You're not doing well because of what someone external to your environment did to you, right? And, it does happen from time to time, has happened historically, but again, when I ask someone, what is it that you want to do that you can't do because of racism? No one's ever given me an answer. Right? No one's ever given me the answer up to this day.
So you're not denying that racist people don't exist or racist cops don't exist. You're saying that the overarching narrative that basically you cannot better your situation, you have no kind of agency to move upwards or move anywhere in society, is the problem.
Yes, I'm definitely saying that there are racist people. White. I even say white supremacy is real. It actually is real. White privilege is real. But I think the mistake that people make about white supremacy and white privilege is that they are focused on the wrong aspects of it. Right? In other words, white domination is real and has been real, right? And it goes way back. It goes centuries. We've been indoctrinated into white superiority and black inferiority for about 3 different decades, right? We've been indoctrinated into this stuff. And I would say that the mistake of the West is that, and in particular America, is that after the Civil War, America should have started a re-education sort of program, right? Where the population get reprogrammed or deprogrammed from the ideas that were promoted in centuries before that about, again, blacks are naturally lazy, white people are, industrious, and they're sanguine, and blacks are, or melancholy. It's all these ideas that are promoted. Then Darwinism came about, and then cultural Darwinism. All these ideas influenced the way that we look at other people. And we had the eugenics movement. There was never a re-education movement, right? That deprogrammed everybody. And so we saw what that resulted in during the 20th century, most of the 20th century. And then now today, Europe and America are undergoing a reckoning, right? A well-deserved reckoning, because they didn't do that, right? So again, white supremacy it's real, right? It's in in our politics, is in economics, is in education, it's in media, it's in pretty much all of the major office or institutions of influence, right? It still remains there, right? But it also is to be found in these type of discussions about Black Lives Matter, about critical race theory, right? Who is leading the charge in these things? About cultural appropriation, who's leading the charge in these things? These are white people, once again, leading the charge here. You're telling everyone else. Most Black people that I know can care less if you wear an African shirt or something like that. This is why you didn't have like a big blow up. I don't know if you remember seeing when Nancy Pelosi was a Speaker of the House, and you have there are these other Democrats prior to the elections that they appeared in this. They were they did a what do you call it? They appeared in a report where they were protesting George Floyd being killed, and they all sort of got down on their knees, and they had the kente cloth around their necks and things like that. Nobody made a big deal out of it. Nobody said that was cultural appropriation. Right? Nobody said it at all. But again, if we go white leadership, there's still white leadership here, right? And again, even still, when we keep using terms, white, black, brown, red, yellow, these were all terms created by white people, right? The more we continue to, we say white bodies, black bodies, brown bodies, right? When we start using those terms again, these are terms that created, they were white men who created these sort of this stratification, this racial stratification, you know, that we still live according, and even the understanding that white men define who white men were, but they also define who other people were as well. So that's all part of white supremacy, right? You know, that we say, okay, I'm black according to the way that white people define me as black, right? You know, so Obama was not allowed to say he was white. Why? Because the way that white people define blackness and everything, you know, didn't allow for him to do that. Right? You know, his mother was white. He could. Why couldn't he say? Why couldn't Obama be white? Right? The vice president, Kamala Harris, right? You know, she's half Jamaican, half Indian, right?
Indian.
You know, sometimes I mean, she was running for Senate. She was like the first Indian American. You know, then she ran for president, the first African American woman, right, to run for office, right? Yeah. So it's, you know, we live with it's very complicated, list of concepts and ideas and assumptions, right, that actually make a robust conversation about these things very difficult, right? But people are often looking at white supremacy in the wrong areas. White privilege, for instance, white privilege is real, but we're talking about more of psychological and social privilege. We're not necessarily talking about all white people have economic privilege or all white, even though the people who use the term white privilege, that they mean everything in every way. White people are privileged more than other people. If a white person would come to me and say that, you know, hey man, you're oppressed and I'm not oppressed, you know, basically he's a racist in my viewpoint, because he basically said that, listen, you know, that my reality is defined by my victimhood and I can't do anything, right? You know, that he can do, right? You know, so that's a racist person. He's looking down upon me, right? He's belittling my existence. So, but white privilege is what we give to them, right? If we have a problem with white privilege, then we just need to stop giving it to them, right? Stop giving white people privilege, because we're the ones making them privileged. You understand? You know, and Muslims do this shit all the time. You know, where they used to, and now things are changing. But white convert, you know, oh, we're gonna, let's hold them up as a prize. So it's real. This is done, right? I've had experience some years ago where as a masjid, actually a couple of masjids, I've been given khutbah for multiple years, and the masjid would post videos of specific people giving khutbahs. There's an individual white brother who was a student of mine, right? Who moved to the area, and he started to give khutbahs at these places. And they started to post his videos. And I said, man, you know, I've been giving khutbahs there for years, and they never posted any one of my videos, you know. And then all of a sudden, this white brother comes and everything, and they're posting their videos, right? Posting his videos. I said, oh, and again, he's a student of mine, right? So I was just like, okay, you know. So yeah, so there's definitely these problems, right, that Muslims have to deal with. They have to deal with, but I do think that we're focused on the wrong aspects of white supremacy. We have, in terms of white supremacy, obviously, like Dr. Jackson often used to, Dr. Sherman Jackson will often you know, highlight the psychological, spiritual, emotional effects of white supremacy rather than the physical domination. Like, for instance, we focus on, okay, white cop kills black person, right? You know, we're focusing so much on that. That's bad, you know, if it's only because the person was black and that's why he killed them, right? Yeah, that's, you know, something to focus on. But what about how, you know, white supremacy affects the way that we see white people, that we assume them to be superior, we assume their civilization to be superior, we actually grant them credence before our own, right? Epistemological sort of like advantage that they have, right? You know, it's not real until white people says it, right? You know, I mean, how does it affect our iman? Right? You know what I'm saying? So his focus largely has been about that, rather than the type of things that we've been obsessing about, like right now. You know, I personally myself, I'm not really that much bothered by somebody calling me the N-word. and again, I don't want anybody to call me any bad words, but I'm saying that if I hear, for instance, that Muslims are utilizing like the N-word or whatever word that they utilize in their original language, which may be derogatory towards Black people, I'm not going to go on a crusade to try to eradicate that. I mean, somebody can do that, but that's not me. That's not my focus, right? I think that too much energy can be expended in that, right? In those type of things. But realistically, what matters is treatment, right? People will always have negative, views of other people, right? Like a white man married to a Black woman, again, that doesn't prove that the person is not racist. The racism also may often come out once you have an argument and the thoughts that go through your head about like, oh, I wish I should have married someone from my own race, right? Or any other race that it can happen with, it doesn't make you all of a sudden now not racist, right? It's convenient. It makes you have the claim. You can make the claim now, but again, I'm not saying it to say that only white people are racist, but I'm just simply making a point that fundamentally to focus only on what people say or perhaps even what people think, right? Rather than the treatment, the way that they're being treated or the way that they treat you, I think is wasted energy. It's wasted. We're not going to get rid of prejudice. Human beings are prejudiced by nature. We make choices. We choose some things and we leave other things. And we can only manage it better. That's all we can do. We can't eradicate racism. We can't eradicate prejudice, right? So we can work to eradicate discrimination, right, on the basis of race and on the basis of sex, right? But we can't, again, make people stop thinking in prejudicial terms.
So you're saying we need something more transformational rather than just tokenistic change, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, because you want to like fire people because so and so called me the N-word. We need to fire that person. That doesn't make the person stop being racist, right? It doesn't at all, right? It may just take it underground, right? But how are you treating that person? How do you react to that person? Is there something you can do to help that individual to grow, right? So it's I just think that to expend so much energy on those type of things is really, really a waste.
I mean, I am glad that to some extent, well, to a great extent, that overtly racist language and, expressions are now not okay, in society. I mean, that's definitely a good thing, right? Like that our kids don't have to grow up with the same kind of.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing if the people are not doing it because of their own. Well, the people are no longer utilizing those type of words because they believe these can be bad. Bad social.
Okay, right.
I guess you would say bad for social interaction, right? And that they're unethical. Sure, yeah. But if people are being compelled against, using those type of terms, I don't necessarily think that bodes well for society. It just, again, because people just go underground.
They're saying it at home, but they're just not saying it in public, right?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to say it publicly, and of course, we don't want people to say it at home either. But I just think that when you actually have policies that punish language, right, and offensive language, right, unless you're talking about something that incites, is very insightful. Yeah, I think that's fine to punish insightful type of language, which leads to chaos and things like that. But if you're just talking about a person, expressing their viewpoint about me or you, to me, I actually appreciate the fact that people are able to say those things because then you know who to keep your distance from. Right? But when no one can say it, you don't know who's actually the snake in the grass, who actually is going to be the one undermining you. And then, and again, I would bring it up the American Democrats once again, is that while there's a focus on okay, what happened? Then we had Jim Crow, we had the Black Codes, we had a lot of discrimination. Things with regard to voting historically. People don't realize that these were the Democrats. These are the Democrats who were doing these things first and foremost, and then second of all, even if we say, okay, that the Democrats are now, those Democrats switch parties to the Republican Party, which again is a myth that is promoted often today. But even if you say that, that the most harmful policies for blacks in the inner city have been the policies that have been championed largely by Democrats. The sexual revolution, welfare, the breakup of the family, et cetera, right? And those same Democrats are the ones who run the inner cities. They talk so much about how they are our friends, but they haven't done anything to improve the inner cities. Even though they're the ones who've been running them for the past few decades. Not the Republicans. Republicans haven't been running those cities, right? So while you can speak nicely to me, but it doesn't really mean you're my friend. I actually like one who's much more boorish and is willing to come out and be sincere and honest about how they feel about me. Because then I know I can prepare for that. I can prepare myself for any type of harm that may come to me from that person. But when the person is talking to me nicely, but then at the same time they're undermining me, they're destroying me, right? Without me knowing, I'm just like a frog in hot water and boiling water that's on the rise to boil, right? That's really the only difference between the two.
Jazakallah khairan, Doctor. Just lastly, I really like to hear from you, like first of all, like what you think might be some blind spots with I think you call them the immigrant community, right? Like what's your definition of immigrant community, by the way? Do you include Africans in that?
The Africans will be included in that definition to me as well, right? In the U.S., for instance, you have probably three basic types of blacks. We have the indigenous blacks, who are the descendants of African slaves, and then you have those from the Caribbean, and then you have those from the continent, directly from the continent. While I would include the Africans, that I'm largely talking about we call the Desi or Indo-Pakistani community, or the Arabs as well, or the Persian, and also the Persians, right? It's largely, I would say, because I think that the Africans don't have as much influence on the direction of Islam, at least in America, that these other organizations and groups do, right? So,
so what would your message be to the immigrant community? Like, what would you like them to know about the issue of racism and in America and the West? And also, what would you like fellow Black people to know about it? And how would you address them? Because I don't want anyone to go away from this discussion thinking, feeling alienated, I guess, or feeling like, okay, so what's the way forward? Because to some extent, I feel like maybe the left have provided something for people to hold on to, right? Like, and so in the absence of a counter narrative, or in the absence of a visible counter narrative, people have just kind of latched onto it, right? So if we want to create change, I guess we've got to articulate what we like to see and message we'd like to give, Right. So I'd love you to be able to do that.
Yeah, sure. For the quote unquote immigrant community, I would say that it doesn't serve Blacks to treat us as victims, as permanent victims. Right? It doesn't serve us well. If anything, that itself is a much more racist treatment than to demand from us to take advantage of opportunities that avail, before us. Right. The situation isn't as it appears. Blacks can do and be anything that you can be and do. There are no social or structural barriers keeping us from doing that. with the exception perhaps of certain people who have been formerly incarcerated, who find themselves in situations where it's difficult for them to do better, right? Most of them, at least. Right. So with that exception of that very small minority of black Americans, that everyone else has the opportunity to do better. And I do think that it would serve as better for you to, if you know of opportunities, and you can help by providing those opportunities. You can encourage us to take advantage of things that exist, but you should never validate any un-Islamic behavior that originates from us. And this is something that happened in particular in the summers when we saw the riots, and these are certain popular Muslims, in particular in America, saying things like, who are you to tell them how to protest their injustices against them, right? When blacks are going and destroying their own neighborhoods, burning things down, burning down businesses and looting businesses. No, you don't put up for that. You don't validate those things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to punish you, for validating those type of things or deeming the haram to be halal, because it's a type of kufr. Yeah, for you to deem the unlawful to be lawful. Imam al-Tahawi, he mentions that we don't deem anyone to be a kafir because of a sin that he commits unless he deems it to be lawful, right? And ar-rida bil kufri kufr, and being content with kufr is kufr itself. So when you see someone stealing something, seeing someone destroying property, seeing someone attacking a person physically who hasn't done anything to them, and you say, hey, it is what it is, that you are making the unlawful, the haram halal, and that itself is a type of kufr. Right? So that doesn't help any of us at all. And that's my message to the immigrant community. With regard to the black community, I would say as well that the opportunities abound. You have to decide what is it that you want to do with your life, right? And then pursue those things. There's nothing standing in your way from becoming whatever you want to become and doing whatever you want to do. It's only in your head, and you're only being told that by the same white supremacists that you believe that you're fighting against. Right, that those leftists, those individuals, those progressives, those are the white supremacists. They're the ones who tell you that you're a victim, you can't do anything without us, and we're going to help you. So just sit back, lay back, and we just relax, and we're gonna handle it. And they're reinforcing for you. They themselves, they are reproducing the trauma, of the historical trauma. They're the ones who are dictating to you or telling you that the legacy of slavery is what defines you, rather than the legacy of fight and struggle and overcoming adversity, because that's where we were prior to all of this mess becoming mainstream. This critical race theory becoming mainstream is that our predecessors, it is a betrayal of their legacy for us to say that there's nothing I can do. There's never been anything I could ever do, and I'm just going to sit back and then wait for these white people to fix these things for me that they broke in me. No, that our predecessors, they built cities, they ran for office, they became public office people, members of public office, Supreme Court justices, Congress people, senators, the business people, and you still see a lot of those people today, right? So reality belies all the claims. I would say that the reality belies all the claims. And once we come to that understanding and realization that it is the media, it is Hollywood, it is the academic establishment, our schools, all these things, these are the things that are actually manipulating us and making us believe that there's nothing we can do better. And once we come to that realization and we leave those things aside, will our condition become better. And as the Quran says, that Allah, He does not change what is with the people until they change what is with themselves. Or as in Surah Al-Anfal, and that is because Allah, He does not remove a blessing that He gave to the people until they change what is within themselves. So it happens in both directions, that Allah will change your situation from bad to good, but He also will change it it from good to bad, right? And it all comes down to how you look at things and what is within your heart and within your mind. And so once you throw off those shackles, then inshallah, life will become better.
Would you also say that you'd like to see more people turning to God, right? Turning to Islam even?
Yes, of course. Yes, right. Both from the black and in all communities. But yeah, that we've lost a sense of mission, right? In the West in particular. I mean, and in Muslim countries, you don't necessarily have a sense of mission because everybody's Muslim, at least, or Muslim at least. But in the West, we don't have the sense of mission that it seemed that we once had, especially prior to 9/11. Where people were interested in da'wah and spreading Islam. But now it's like we're just trying to fit in. We are citizens. We've embraced, that we are the citizens of this country. We live in a secular society, and we have to embrace civil rights and support everybody's civil rights. And so we're just like everybody else. No, you're not just like everyone else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He values the believing soul over the non-believing soul, right? That's Allah and His messenger telling and He wants people to be saved, and so and one of our obligations, our responsibility is for us to spread the message of Islam. And CRT is not the message of Islam. The message of Islam, what again was articulated by Malcolm, it was articulated by these non-Muslim, Thomas Carlyle and Arnold J. Toynbee, by Gandhi, Dr. Howard Thurman. I mean, what all of those comments they made and positive comments they made about Islam, that's what real Islam is, and the hope for the world is for them to do better in times of racial strife is for them to turn to Islam. And it's not to say that, that we believe in a raceless society. Allah says He made us into tribes and peoples, right? So people are, He did that to people. So we are different, but the idea is different, that, the pre-modern
to be celebrated
races were, right, exactly, right, right, so, and it's okay to feel pride about where you're from. It's not a problem at all, right? Quran doesn't forbid that, and what your ethnicity is, and what your parents and your forefathers and mothers, what they had done. There's nothing wrong with that, Islamically, but the idea that that you can just simply assume what some other person from a different race or category or population thinks and believes about other people, it's just absurd, and there's nothing Islamic about it. It's satanic, and it's neo-racism. Anti-racism today is neo-racism, right? Anything we hear people say anti-racism, again, you're just racism. It's just a new type of racism. That's all it is, right? It just happens to be focused largely on white people, and this is why somebody like Ibrahim Kendi can say, that we, in order to combat racism, we need to have more racism. Right, so they're explicit about this stuff. There's nothing Islamic about any of that.
Oh, Dr. Abdullah, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much for giving me so much of your time and really going through all of that, and actually really changed the way I'm thinking and given me a lot more to think about, actually. So I do really appreciate that. I'm sure our listeners also have benefited from that. Dear brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoyed that episode and benefited from it. Please do share it with somebody and leave a comment and let us know what you think about the issues that we've discussed. And inshallah, with that, I'm going to just sign off. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. You've been listening to Ummah Talk with Fatima Barkatulla. Please share this episode, please leave a comment, and let us know what you think about the issues that we've discussed. Jazakumullahu khairan, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.